Birds, TV talking Philadelphia Eagles. We have a lot to get into. Obviously, we got to continue. We talk about the Philadelphia Eagles offense, ladies and gentlemen. It continues, but it is heating up. It is heating up. Apparently, they had an interview current Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Deacon Dougal. A young guy, 29 years old, very, very green, very, very kind of, not a lot of experience calling plays. But if you look at the things that he did do with the Chicago Bears offense last season, it kind of fits in. It kind of fits right in with what we could certainly benefit from. The Chicago Bears last season, obviously they had, two running backs that they utilized, quite well, quite frequently. The run game was very good. And also, they and DeAndre Swift, they definitely got a lot of things going. We're able to convert the chains quite frequently, and then also you saw the progression and the development of second-year quarterback Caleb Williams as well. Now, is Caleb Williams ceiling higher than Jalen Hurts? Probably. But Jalen Hurts also has, I'm certainly not comparing Jalen Hurts to Caleb Williams. Jalen Hurts also has, refined his technique over the years he's been the starting quarterback. Obviously not turning the ball over as much, being a little bit more consistent in that area. And he's never really been a guy, honestly, if you look all the way back at Jalen Hurts' football career and even back into college, he's never been one to turn the ball over. So we do have a lot to get into. I am kind of leaning towards being on board with Deacon Dougal. I didn't pronounce his name correctly yesterday. That's for darn sure. But the other thing too is like there's not much that I do know about him, but I'm starting to learn more about him for sure. And is it going to be a high risk, high reward situation if we did go ahead and we're able to hire Deacon Dougal as the new offensive coordinator? Probably. I mean, the truth is, I think that we all know is that a lot of that offensive creativity does come from Ben Johnson, and the Ben Johnson was able to bring his offensive creativity that he had with the Detroit Lions over to Chicago. So obviously that's the common denominator there. And can Deacon Dougal bring those concepts to Philadelphia? I mean, I certainly hope so. If he ends up being the guy, I certainly hope so. The one thing I can say, and I'll continue to say, and I've said this, I've thought this, and I said this yesterday, said it throughout the stream yesterday, is that I want a guy will bring in new ideas. We'll kind of, bring in creativity, enough creativity where it oversees, any type of Nick Sirianni influence. So, we're going to get a lot, we're going to talk about that a lot. And, the other thing that I want to talk about is Brian Daboll still on the board. Obviously we saw that Mike McDaniel did sign with the Chargers yesterday, so he's off the board. Does Brian Daboll, does Joe Brady or Brian Daboll, take the Bills job? Does Phillip Rivers, get the head coaching job for the Buffalo Bills? Maybe. I think that I do think it is a little bit. I do think that is a little bit of a wacky idea, just to kind of bring this guy out of retirement just to be your head coach. But then again, the Buffalo Bills are kind of fucking their situation all up, and honestly, they're kind of in the same boat we are, except for the fact that they're looking for a new head coach. They have a talented quarterback who can win games, And they gotta find the right pieces to keep that franchise afloat, to keep their Super Bowl window afloat. If the Buffalo Bills are even in the Super Bowl window, I mean, we've seen Josh Allen make it to the playoffs pretty much every single year of his career with the Buffalo Bills, and has yet to make it to the big game. Now, obviously, he had Patrick Mahomes standing in his way, but last season he didn't have Patrick Mahomes standing in his way. He didn't have Joe Burrow standing in his way. He didn't have Lamar Jackson standing in his way. All of the elite quarterbacks from the AFC standing in his way, and he just couldn't get the job done. But what has that brought us? That's brought us new perspective and looking at the bright young quarterbacks like Drake May or Sam Darnold obviously has turned things around. And we'll also I'll also be talking about my predictions for the AFC and NFC championship games this weekend. So very excited to talk about that. I do want to talk about this, however. This is a conversation that I started yesterday, and I'll bring it back up today, which is, do we have a Jalen Hurts problem or do we have a Nick Sirianni problem? What exactly is wrong with this offensive scheme that over the years, and I'll say this again, I brought this up yesterday, which is I went all the way back to Nick Sirianni's very first press conference, and how he said that he wanted to install simple systems that we can easily understand, but is complex for the defense to figure out. Well, those simple systems have become too simple, and they're not getting the job done. There is no consistency. I honestly think that our offensive players are getting bored with the systems in place, and I think that we need to bring in a guy at offensive coordinator, like I said, who's going to bring in a scheme that will change the narrative, that will get guys excited, not even to just, playing the scheme, but also just excited to learning the scheme. We want to see guys, fired up from the very get-go. That's the offensive coordinator hire that we want, that we got to find is guys, or is a guy that's gonna illuminate the passion and the excitement of these players again. I'm tired of hearing reports every offseason that we're just passing out swing passes to the running back, and then we don't even do that often in the regular season. So the things that we practice, it seems, in the during training camp and things like that, we're not even seeing that on the field. We wait until the regular season starts to sprinkle in some things, and then when when they've been sprinkling in those things, it's been inconsistent. And I do want to talk about the tush push too. I mean, if you look at the play itself, the tush push play itself, it was extraordinarily consistent, ever since 2022 when Nick first introduced it. And yeah, last year, earlier in the season, it wasn't as consistent as it had been in previous years. But and then they kind of ditched the play. They ditched the play for about most of the season, until the wild card game. And in the wild card game, it was consistent again. I think we got 3 first downs based off of the consistency of the tush push in the wild card game. So it's like, okay, that's something that we could have been doing earlier. Why weren't we? And it's so frustrating. It's honestly very, very frustrating. We have all this talent, and you hear about from other teams, we got to scheme guys open. We got to scheme guys open to move the ball. And we have all the talent in the world on our offense, and we can't seem to do that. So it goes back to, is Jalen Hurts the problem? I don't think so. I still believe in the player. I still believe in Jalen Hurts. Hurts. I still think that he, is capable of great things. I do think it's a Nick Sirianni problem. I do think it's a Nick Sirianni problem, and I think that his scheme is so confined and so predicated on not taking big risks that we don't push the ball down the field that often. It's very calculated if we do, and sometimes if we miscalculate those plays, then it looks like we're fitting puzzle pieces in places where they don't belong. And it's definitely looked like that the last 2 years. Everybody wants to shit on the 2023 season because obviously it was a pretty epic collapse. I think we were like 10-1, and then we lost 6 of our last 7 games, and that's including the wild card loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But at least we were moving the ball, with Brian Johnson as offensive coordinator, and at least we were putting up yards. Yeah, Jalen threw 15 interceptions that season. But the offense had more consistency. The more of the problem during that season was the defense. It came back down to the defense not being able to stop anybody. But I'm very excited about the fact that like this offensive coordinator position. It took them 12 days to hire Kellen Moore, last year. So I think we're kind of breaching that window. We're kind of breaching that limit right now. I can't say for sure how many days it's been, but it's certainly been about that. And so maybe they have something coming. Are they gonna sign an offensive coordinator today? Is it gonna be tomorrow? Is it gonna be Monday? Is it gonna be Tuesday? Is it gonna be soon? Gosh, is it gonna be soon? They've interviewed Matt Nagy, they've interviewed Ken Robinson, they've interviewed Charlie Weiss Jr., they've interviewed Deacon Dougal now. It seems like they're high on Deacon Dougal from all the reports that I've seen. They've really liked Charlie Weiss Jr. in the past. I'm fine with both of those guys. Even though they don't have a lot of play call experience. I'm fine with either one of those guys. So we'll just have to, see. Am I excited about Matt Nagy? I wouldn't say, because Matt Nagy, that name is getting a lot of smoke right now, and that's why I bring it up. Is would I be excited about Matt Nagy? I don't think I would necessarily be excited, but he has experience. He's a guy that has experience, and he spent the last 3 years back with Andy Reid, obviously. So he would definitely bring experience. He would definitely bring a plan that he probably feels confident in, working with Patrick Mahomes and things like that. And then obviously there's Joe Brady as well. Me personally, I haven't seen the Eagles. I haven't seen a report that the Eagles have actually interviewed Joe Brady. So I'm not necessarily sure about that. But at the end of the day, if these guys that you've interviewed so far can off the menu, why don't you bring in Cliff Kingsbury? It doesn't, like, they haven't even interviewed Cliff Kingsbury yet. Like, that's the thing, is what's the stigma? Like, or maybe they have interviewed Cliff Kingsbury and they just haven't reported it yet, and maybe they're just keeping it a secret and they're just continuing to do their due diligence. But, Cliff Kingsbury, while I wasn't as particularly excited about what he did with the Commanders, actually in 2023, when he I'm pretty sure in 2020 it was 2023. Maybe it was last year that he signed with the Commanders. That was his first year with the Commanders. But he did some great things with with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, and they made the playoffs, and they made the NFC Championship. So I mean, you know, if somebody were to say that Cliff Kingsbury's offense was a failure in Washington, I couldn't necessarily agree with that statement. I mean, we saw what happened to them, last year. Jaden Daniels got hurt early in the season, and whenever an offensive coordinator loses their star quarterback, it makes things tougher. And obviously we saw that Marcus Mariota had to take over, and we know all too well what Marcus Mariota can and cannot do, and there's not much that he can do. We had him in Philadelphia for what, a year, and the dude couldn't complete a pass. So I think that there are still good options on the board for this team at offensive coordinator. I still think that there are, things that we can do. I still think there's things to be excited about, but it seems like the question that is getting, proposed lately a lot is, is it Nick or is it Jalen? And like I said, I'll go back to, I do not think it's a Jalen problem. I think here's the thing that I want to bring up, which is, it's always when it comes to the quarterback position and, his early career and his developing career, the question is always asked, has Jalen regressed? Has Jalen progressed? What has been, is he getting better as a quarterback? This is what I'll say. This is what I believe. I think that I'm not going to say Jalen has regressed. I do think that there's a little mix of everything. I think Jalen has progressed, and he has refined his ability to play the quarterback position. But I think he's refined it in a confined manner. And what I mean by that is he's refined his game as a quarterback within the confinements of the limitations of the scheme. And so that leads me back to, it's a Nick Sirianni problem. That's the one common denominator between the ineffectiveness of the passing game. It's one common denominator. Your wide receivers are running simple routes. They're running high school routes. It's not even a college offense. It's a high school offense. And it's becoming predictable for defenses to defend the wide receivers. And, therefore it's making things tighter for Jalen to throw into. I watched Jalen Hurts, Alabama games, and also his Oklahoma, the Oklahoma games from his one season at Oklahoma last night. And Jalen can throw it across the yard. Jalen can throw it across the yard. I see, even though he was throwing to guys like Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs and CeeDee Lamb and all of these guys, Jalen can put up a show if the wide receiver concepts are more complex. He can work with it. I've heard too many people say that Jalen Hurts can't work a complex system. It's bullshit. We saw him do it. We saw him do it in college. Now, granted, it was college, but he played for two of the top programs in the NCAA. So I still have faith in the player, and I still believe in the player, and I still don't think that Jalen has reached his ceiling yet. I think that he, like I said, he's working within the confinements of Nick Sirianni's scheme. And that's what I believe. That's what I believe. We need to bring in a guy. We need to bring in an offensive coordinator who is going to shake things up and who's going to get these guys excited again. Gonna bring in new concepts and, gonna have the wherewithal to say, this is what we're running. This is what we're going to get good at. This is what we're going to continue to do. Because I have so much faith in my offense working with these players that we're going to continue on the path that we need to continue on to get everybody on board. So unfortunately, Nick is still going to have his 2 cents to put in when it comes to the development of the offensive game plan, because he is the head coach. That is something that we're going to have to deal with. But that's why I said this yesterday in my stream yesterday, which is I think that, giving the new offensive coordinator full autonomy, I think that should be something that's on the menu in these interviews, that they're saying to everyone, every single one of the candidates. It goes back to, it goes back to, I think, that's what's needed. That's what's needed to spark some change. Because if they can't get this right, then it's gonna be there are gonna be some hot seats. There are gonna be some hot seats in Philadelphia. Now, my question is this: who does, if the offense continues to stay the same, who does Howie and Jeffrey have more loyalty to? Is it going to be Nick or is it going to be Jalen? And that's a tough one. It's a tough question. I still, I hate being at a loss, but I talk myself into so many circles about this team, because they should be so much better than they actually are on both sides of the ball. We should look like the Rams. We should look like the Rams, and not even that. Actually, I will because the defense is better. I will say that we should look like the Seattle Seahawks do this season, and we should look like them year in and year out with the amount of talent that we have on both sides of the ball. With the fact that we have Vic Fangio as a defensive coordinator, with the fact that we have two, a studly secondary, with the fact that we have studs on offense all across the board. I'm talking about, obviously I'm talking about Jalen Hurts, I'm talking about, and the fact that he has he's a dual threat, with the fact that we have AJ Brown, we have Devontae Smith. Hell, we even have a prominent, underrated, underappreciated, I believe, wide receiver in Jahan Dotson. We've had Goddard. We've had a stud offensive line who wasn't studly this season, but we have two young stud running backs, not just Saquon. We have Tank Bigsby, who is absolutely phenomenal. And I think they're gonna give him a contract. I think they're actually going to give him a contract extension depending upon what happens with Saquon, this upcoming year. But again, I go back to those two running backs, would fit well into what Deacon Dougal did with, what Deacon Dougal and Ben Johnson did with the Chicago Bears. And so that's why I'm starting to get on board with the Deacon Dougal shit. I don't know how, we still don't know how hot of a prospect he actually is, but he's certainly, they brought him in for an interview, so we'll just have to see. I would love to see the Chicago Bears offense in Philadelphia. I would be on board. I would be on board with that. I might even be, I was talking up Charlie Weiss Jr. a lot yesterday, but like I might even be on board with taking the higher risk, high reward option of bringing in Deacon Duel. Now the thing is how would they sell that guy? It's not a guy that like a lot of people it's not a guy that a lot of people know. And obviously a lot of Philadelphia fans are, we're jumping at the bit for a play caller like Mike McDaniel or possibly Brian Daboll or one of those names. But how would they sell a young guy who, is a high risk, high reward like Deacon Dugal to the team, and I think that they would pretty much just say he's highly regarded in NFL circles and so on and so forth, and and he comes from the Ben Johnson coaching tree. That's the other thing too is like they interviewed Jim Bob Cooter, who would be another Nick Sirianni coaching tree guy, and if we bring in another guy from the Nick Sirianni coaching tree who has worked with Nick Sirianni, in the past, he's gonna submit to Nick whenever Nick wants to do something. So, God, I fucking hope, I really do. I hope that we don't do that. Because that's the last thing that we need to do right now is bring in a guy who has worked with Nick Sirianni before. So, give me your thoughts. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Which offensive coordinator prospects that you guys are looking at. I'd love to talk about it. But I don't think it's a Jalen Hurts problem. I think it's a Nick Sirianni problem. I think that the scheme, that's the thing is I think the player culture. I brought this up yesterday. I think the player culture is actually great. I think it's the coaching staff culture that needs to be fixed and has a problem. And a lot of throughout the national media, ESPN, and all of the NFL media outlets, like everybody's saying, like, is the position of offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, is it actually desirable? Our offensive coordinator candidates like scaring away from taking the job in Philadelphia based off the fact that we're gonna boo you at offensive coordinator if you suck. We're gonna let you know how we feel about it. Especially if you look as stale as Kevin Patullo did all season long. And then also, do you want to be the guy that follows up Kevin Patullo's first season as a play caller and how bad he has been? Those are all things that are kind of taken into account, and I'm sure that they are. These people are humans. Just because they work in the NFL, they are still humans. They do still have feelings. They still have thoughts about everything that goes into making decisions. I'm sure that those things do play into account. When they're making a decision. But the thing that I believe is and Greg Olson said this, which is, you would think that all the talent that we do have outweighs any of those negative or any of those cons, that I just listed. So, but they're taking their time. They're taking their sweet time, and do we know if that's because they can't find a guy that they really like yet, or is it because that guys are saying no? I do think it's interesting that Brian Daboll might still be on the board, but do we want do we want a guy like Brian Dable on the coaching staff? Do we actually like Brian Dable, or do we like him because he has experience with Jalen Hurts and he coached Josh Allen, and he did some good things with Jackson Dart last season, but he also almost fucking got Jackson Dart killed. So, and then do we need two explosive personalities on the sideline within the coaching staff? Is that something that we need in Philadelphia? Obviously, we have Nick Sirianni, who is always who wears his emotions on his sleeve, and that's great. That's fine. That's good. That's good for the city. That's not a negative with this team. I would say it does go a little too far sometimes, but to have two of those guys on the sideline, yeah, we might have to hire another big dom if we had two of those guys on the sideline. So here's the thing. My thing is this, and this is going to be a constant. This also is going to be a constant question throughout the off season until one way or the other it comes to fruition. Which is, are we going to trade AJ Brown? Because that's the other thing that comes into play when discussing the hire of a new offensive coordinator. I'm sure the new offensive coordinator candidates are asking, is AJ Brown going to be on the team? So, are we going to trade him? It doesn't seem feasible that we will, or that we even can. And I honestly, I don't want to see that band being broken up. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, like they're all really, really close, like all of them. And so, if we lose AJ Brown and then we also lose Dallas Goedert, it's just more holes to fill, man. It's just more holes to fill. There is one thing that is going to need to happen, if we do decide, if we are keeping AJ Brown, that means that wide receiver position needs to be restructured to get more cap space, because it's gonna start looking heavy. But would he even be willing to do that? So, I mean, that's the other thing. And it is quite possible that if they are going to trade AJ Brown, they could restructure him, then trade him. That is something that they could certainly do. And Howie finds his ways. He always finds ways to do something. So we'll have to see what happens, but obviously the first shoe to drop needs to be this offensive coordinator position, and there's a lot to talk about throughout the offseason as we go along here. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot to be kind of on edge about, because even if we do hire this offensive coordinator, even if we do hire a decent guy at the offensive coordinator position, we need to know that it's not going to be replicant of like another Nick Sirianni shit show, the common denominator for the inefficiencies and inconsistencies for this offense, I truly believe this, is Nick Sirianni. Don't think it's Jalen Hurts. I don't think it's AJ Brown. I don't think it's Devontae Smith. I don't think it's Saquon Barkley. I don't think it's the offensive line. I think it's Nick Sirianni. And I can't completely fault the offensive line last year, because the one thing that I believe to be true is how well did Kevin Patullo get along with, or marry up with, Jeff Stoutland. Jeff Stoutland obviously being the run game coordinator and the offensive line coach. So you have to make sure that like your offensive line coach and your run game coordinator is going to be on the same page with the run plays that you call and at what time and so on and so forth. It's mind-boggling to me that the offensive line fell off as much as it did this past season. I think there's definitely deeper issues there. I think the deeper issues, one of the main components of it was Kevin Patullo, and obviously he's no longer here. Well, I guess he's gonna be kept on the staff in some capacity, or he's not, or whatever is happening with that situation. But he obviously was definitely demoted. So, so yeah, like I say, I mean, it brings us almost to like a complete loss. Like, what do we fucking say about this team? I don't like being in a situation where it's like, sometimes I just don't even know where to go, and especially when they lose, and especially when they look as inconsistent as they did, and how they can look good for one half and how they can look absolutely awful in the second half. You talk about your tale of two halves games, but we had like multiple of them. We had that's pretty much what every single game, during the regular season was, and in the wild card loss, it was a tale of two halves. But it's not even like they were typical tale of two half games. It's like we couldn't gain a fucking yard, in the second half, and then with the exception of the Rams game, obviously, like we didn't move the ball well in the first half, but we moved it extraordinarily well in the second half. And so, we need to find a guy who's gonna bring consistency. And I don't care who it is. I don't care who it is. I think actually I'll phrase that part differently. I think that every single candidate that you are interviewing for this offensive coordinator position needs to at least guarantee that he will bring consistency to this team. Like that will be number one. Absolutely number one. And then number two is like, how well is he calling plays? Can he get the guys fired up to buy in to this, to this offensive scheme? Does he have full autonomy to be able to run and call his own plays, throughout the season with the offensive scheme that he's going to be bringing to the team? So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of thoughts to be talked about, and I think I like, honestly, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me how much we wanted to shit on AJ Brown, throughout the season, and I'm not saying that most Eagles fans wanted to do that, but there was the narrative of kind of telling him to be quiet was certainly developing throughout the entire season. But he's right, man. He's right. He was right about this offense from the very get-go. And I believe that Jalen Hurts and him and Devontae and Saquon, I believe they all felt the same way about this offensive play caller and where this offense was going. And everybody's worried about the fact that Jalen Hurts didn't run the ball as much, this season. And why is that? Is he not wanting to run the ball as much? Is he losing his ability? I don't think he's fucking losing his ability. I don't think he's losing his ability. Like there's not really a sign of Jalen, and I've seen this in other videos, talking about the Eagles on YouTube, where like, is Jalen Hurts slowing down? No, he's not. Like he's not slowing down. He hasn't shown any signs whatsoever of fucking slowing down. When he wants to run, he'll run. And he looks great, doing it. When he wants to have high intuition, on scramble plays, he's able to do it. I believe, and I was thinking about this last night, because it's all I'm thinking about right now, one of the main things that I'm thinking about right now is because this is going to be such a huge, important offseason for the Eagles. But like, we knew that AJ Brown knew, at least since week 3, that the offense sucked and was going to suck. Maybe Jalen Hurts knew as well. In the first 2 games of the season, and especially the first game of the season against the Dallas Cowboys, Jalen was running all over the fucking yard. And was very intuitive with with his scrambles. The first 2 touchdowns I believe that we had in that game were 10 plus yard out from the end zone Jalen scrambles. I think Jalen knew as well that this offense wasn't gonna fucking be good, and maybe he decided to preserve himself. Because he knew that KP was not gonna come back for another year. Now, granted, is that the healthy thing to say? Is that what we want to hear? Obviously, because we want our quarterback to try and put it on the line, game in and game out. Obviously, and that's not coming into question. Like Jalen's want to. When it comes to winning is absolutely never in question. That's all he wants to do. That's all he wants to do is win. But could he have been preserving himself, equaling not running as much, because he knew that Kevin Patullo wasn't going to be the offensive coordinator this upcoming season? He wanted to preserve his health for whichever new offensive coordinator was coming in. Whichever new offensive coordinator is coming in to take over this offensive scheme. Maybe. And maybe that was the case for a lot of the guys. Maybe that was the case for a lot of the guys. It's certainly something to think about. Nothing is off the board. No thoughts are off the board. So share your thoughts, whichever you want, whatever you want to say, whatever your prerogative is, bring it up and we'll fucking talk about it. But I get to the point where I'm just so at a loss with this team because there's so much talent. Howie Roseman, here's the thing, and I've also seen this too, and this kind of is an addition onto the, is it a Nick Sirianni problem or is it a Jalen Hurts problem? I've seen this too in some videos where people are talking about, well, maybe it actually goes back to Howie. Maybe it's a Howie problem, and it's not a fucking Howie problem. Howie is a genius and will also do whatever it takes to make sure that we hoist another Lombardi trophy at the end of the season. Howie Roseman, brought in. Obviously, he traded for Jahan Dotson, last year, and then we also brought in the other dude who played with Jalen and Devontae at or maybe he didn't play with Jalen, but I know he played with Devontae at Alabama. I forgot that wide receiver's name that we traded for, but he again was a guy that had a lot of potential and was great in college, and his NFL career hasn't quite panned out the way that it should have due to the fact that due to injuries. The guy that we traded for from the Texans, I don't necessarily remember his name, but he was a he is a skill piece. The reason there were two trades that I was really excited about and throughout the season that happened earlier in the season or before the season started, and that was the Tank Bigsby trade, and it was this guy. Let me see if I can bring it up. His name is just off the top of my. Oh, John Mechie. Yeah, John Mechie again, and I'm not trying to make the case for John Mechie as a great wide receiver, but like he brings a specific skill set. He was a great, again, he was kind of like one of those guys in the Devontae mold where he was a decent, he was above average to a decent route runner, and he also brought some speed, and that's a skill set that you can bring, and he had decent hands too. That's a skill set that you could bring, and we were all talking about the fact when we traded for him, oh, he's going to be the fourth receiver. Okay, well, what are we going to do with the other guy or any of these other guys competing for the fourth spot? But like when we brought him in, we were talking about how he was immediately probably going to be that fourth wide receiver. And then they just ended up letting him go. You want to know why they ended up letting him go? Because this fucking coaching staff couldn't figure out how to utilize his skill set. I think it's a consistent thing where they have not been good at figuring out how to utilize each player's skill set to the best of their ability. That includes A.J. Brown. That includes Devontae Smith. That includes Saquon Barkley. That includes Dallas Goedert. That includes Tank Bigsby. You know what? Tank Bigsby can catch balls out of the backfield. We've seen him do it. He did it in Jacksonville. Why don't you call more swing? Why don't you call more swing passes for Tank Bigsby? Call more, flat routes for Tank Bigsby. Why do you got to bring in some other guy like Will Shipley, who, by the way, everybody was high on his rookie season, and he looked good, but no. I think he had 1 year to progress, and I'm pretty sure he's gonna be out. I think it's obvious, and I'm pretty sure that this Carson Steele guy that they signed after the season ended, former Chiefs running back / fullback, who was actually somebody that I was actually really excited about, coming out of college. And so like when the Chiefs got him, I was like, oh man, that's going to be a good fucking pick. And he did some good things. He did some good things with the Chiefs too. He's a guy that runs hard, decent quickness. I think what we're going to be able to get out of Carson Steele is what we could have got out of AJ Dillon. And I will go back and I'll say this, and I'll say it over and over again. I still think we could have gotten more out of AJ Dillon, but they completely fucking scrapped him after the game where he fumbled twice, a kickoff, and then also on a quick in-cut route. But so I think that's what they're looking for. I think that they're definitely looking to improve the run game. And I think that they're going to stick with that. And I think that that's important. Obviously, I think that that's important. It's, we want to make sure that that all phases are firing on all cylinders, and we need to get back to something in this offense looking good, something, because none of it looked good this year, none of it. It all looked inconsistent, and Saquon started to come on later in the year. But they would do well. The offense would do well as they would lean on Saquon in the first half, and they would completely scrap it in the second half. And it's like, why? And so that goes back to coaching. Will you die? Will the offensive coordinator that we bring in, the new one, will he die on his scheme? And will it be And will it be a scheme that's worth dying for? Pretty much. Will it be a scheme that's worth dying for? Can you get the most out of these players? Because I can tell you this. I don't think Nick Sirianni gets the best out of his players. He clearly doesn't. There's still more that A.J. Brown can do. There's still more that Devontae Smith can do. I mean, let's talk about that for a fucking second. Like, Devontae Smith is a number one wide receiver. He is a number one wide receiver. He's a fucking Heisman winner. He runs great routes. He's got there's not much that I need to say about Devontae Smith. Like, he's absolutely a phenomenally great wide receiver. And we're running like, and we're not. Why is this guy barely making 900 yards a season? Or I guess I'll say 1,000. But like, why? Why can't we get the most out of the players that we have? These are all-star players. And I'll tell you why. Because it goes back to Sirianni's scheme. And it goes back to me saying that is exactly why I think this is a Nick Sirianni problem. And does that mean I want to fire Nick Sirianni? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that I want to fire Nick Sirianni. It means that I want Howie Roseman and I want Jeffrey Lurie to bring in an offensive coordinator that's gonna bring in an offensive system that's gonna supersede anything that Nick Sirianni wants to do. You want him to be the CEO head coach. Cool. Let him be the CEO head coach. Let him go do that. Let him go ahead and manage, whatever he needs to manage as far as, clock management and, press conference and whatever, and so on and so forth. But just make sure that with the new guy that you hire, the new offensive coordinator that you hire, that he's going to be able to have full autonomy and supersede anything that fucking Nick Sirianni says. Make sure that he's going to be a guy that can get these players excited again. I don't think these guys are as excited as they used to be, and and that includes Jalen Hurts. And I think that it's a shame, but it's very convenient for the Philly media to kind of make it a A.J. Brown versus Jalen Hurts thing. It's very easy to do that. And yeah, it goes back to the T.O. versus Donovan McNabb thing. And yeah, that wasn't a good situation. I remember that. I was in 2005, I was 15 years old. Or 2004, I was 14 years old. It was awful. It was an awful situation. But A.J. Brown is not Terrell Owens. He's not a fucking narcissistic, monster on the sidelines. And Jalen Hurts is not Donovan McNabb, who's a diva who, talks shit behind, his players' backs and so on and so forth and is easily jealous. That's the other thing too, is anything that comes out. I've seen reports about Donovan McNabb trying to have some sort of say over the Jalen Hurts versus A.J. Brown situation. It's not a Jalen Hurts versus A.J. Brown situation. Anything that Donovan McNabb is going to say about that situation, and he thinks that he has any wherewithal about what's going on with that situation, it's absolutely bullshit. It's absolutely bullshit. And the reason why it's bullshit is because Donovan McNabb hasn't been able to be honest about what went on with T.O., since that all went down. He hasn't been able to take accountability for anything that went on with T.O. or Deshaun Jackson's recent comments, actually, as well. So I think this team wants to stay together. I think they want to play together, but I think they're all frustrated with the fact that the offensive scheme fucking sucks consistently season in, season out. And so they're all dealing with their frustrations a little bit different. I think they're all dealing with their frustrations a little bit differently. I think Jalen, and Devontae all want to stick it out and see it through. But I also think that AJ Brown, who and he wants to stick it out and see it through as well. But he's also not afraid to say, hey, and he's also not afraid to he's also not afraid to have the thoughts of like, hey, maybe it would be better to go someplace else. And those are just included in his frustrations with the offense. I don't think AJ's leaving, but I certainly think that they need to bring in a guy, an offensive coordinator who is going to excite the team again. That's what I think. That's what I believe. Moving on for now, let's talk about the fact that Phillip Rivers actually got an interview with the Buffalo Bills to interview for the head coaching position. I think that's fucking insane. And I think that the Buffalo Bills are just grasping at whatever limbs of trees that they possibly can. Limbs of trees of leaves. They're probably grabbing at leaves. Like they're not going to be able to hang on for much longer if they continue to fucking. But here's the thing. There is a case to be made for Phillip Rivers, I guess, to be the head coach. And that's that he has ties to Josh Allen. He worked with Josh Allen before Josh Allen got drafted. And then I've also seen, things where he has ties to Frank Reich. So maybe they could possibly bring in Frank Reich as an offensive coordinator. I don't think I honestly, I haven't heard many reports about Frank Reich being even interested in coaching right now. There hasn't been. So, but obviously he would, he's a good offensive coordinator. He would be a good hire for everybody. But, I thought about the Phillip Rivers thing a little bit more, and the fact that he's actually interested in coaching, enough to accept an interview. Would he be a guy that the Eagles can bring in as offensive coordinator? I'm not saying that would be a great idea, but I'm saying that maybe it's something to look into. Phillip Rivers was one of the best QBs in the league, during his career. It made the Chargers, move off of Drew Brees, which obviously probably was a mistake, but both quarterbacks were really, really good. He does kind of have the Aaron Rodgers knowledge, of the, of different offenses and different offensive schemes and, how to play the quarterback position, So would he be a guy that, that Jalen could work with, or that could work with Jalen, and and what would that look like, or could revitalize the offense for this team? I really do wonder about that. I do think that that's an interesting idea, but quarterbacks, former quarterbacks, they just see the game a little bit differently. They see the game a little bit differently because they've played it as players, especially when they've played it at such a high level. It's another high risk, high reward situation. And I'm certainly not proposing the fact that we go out and we fucking hire Phillip Rivers as our offensive coordinator, but sorry, my cat Bisbee is walking all across the computer. I certainly do wonder. I mean, it's definitely worth wondering about. Would Phillip Rivers be a good offensive coordinator? I just talk about it because it's an interesting topic. And it just seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere, which I think is why the Bills are getting such heavy backlash on the fact that they actually interviewed this guy as head coach. Damn. There's a very good possibility that like we probably won't be good next year. There's a very high possibility that that's going to be the case. Because you look at the fact, I mean, you also look at the guys that we're going to lose, right? I mean, the Eagles don't have a lot of cap space, unfortunately. Bring it up. Yeah, so the impending free agents for the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously the ones that we know, Reed Blankenship, Nakobe Dean, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Phillips, Adoree Jackson, and Brandon Graham. And then obviously, actually, we also have our punter Braden Mann and our long snapper Charlie Hewlett, who are also going to be impending free agents. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. I think that they're going to bring back somebody. I honestly don't know. I think they're going to probably try and bring back a couple players from that list. Is it Nakobe Dean? Is it Reed Blankenship? Jahan Dotson is also part of that list. And what do you do there? I personally believe that they should bring back Jahan Dotson. I wouldn't go above 5 per year. But like I said before, like I think he's an underrated and underappreciated player on this offense. And the reason why we haven't seen more is because the coaching staff doesn't know how to get the best out of their players. And that's honestly, I think that's the headlining narrative, to be completely honest with you. This coaching staff doesn't know how to get the best out of their players. So I think that they should bring back Jahan Dotson. If it's a 4 to 5 year deal, or 4 to 5 year, 4 to 5 per year deal, like maybe, I don't know, 3 for 15 or something like that, 3 for 12, something like that, somewhere in between. I really don't. The one thing that I hate about this free agent class for the Philadelphia Eagles is that I hate that we're going to have to say goodbye to Nakobe Dean. I really don't want to, but I think that that's kind of where it's leaning. And then I also hate the teams that are kind of like rumored to be interested in him, which one of those teams obviously is the Dallas Cowboys. I would hate to see Nakobe Dean go to the Dallas Cowboys. Like that would absolutely that would suck. But it does seem like a move that they would make, and he would be a good player. He would be a good player for them, to be honest. And then you also have Reed Blankenship, who is going to be a free agent, who's a player that Vic Fangio likes a lot. I'm pretty sure Vic Fangio doesn't want to move on from Reed Blankenship. Reed Blankenship is the vocal leader for that secondary, and he also is the play caller for the secondary on the field. So, and he's a good safety. He's not an elite safety, but he's a good safety. He's a smart player. When I think about the safety position and I think about people talking about resigning Reed Blankenship and how they don't want to do it, I'm like, do you guys remember having Quentin Demps? Do you guys remember having those guys after we got rid of Brian Dawkins? The awful secondary play, the awful safety play that we got for years, that we had for years. And the Reed Blankenship story is a good story. He was an undrafted, free agent signing by the Philadelphia Eagles, and turned out to be a really good player. So yeah, I don't want to lose him. He's still young. The one thing that makes the transition from Nakobe Dean easier is, we have decent players at the middle linebacker position, in the wings. And we still have Zach Bond. Zach Bond's still going to be here. Jod Campbell, and then Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So the truth is, we're not even sure how they really feel about Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but I'm pretty sure that they have faith in what he's going to bring in the future too. But yeah, I mean, and the truth is, and then there's Goddard. So we're going to need to look for. So there's going to be some holes. There's going to be some holes all across the board that the Eagles are going to need to try and manage. They're going to need to try and fix. I said this yesterday, which is doesn't matter how big the hole is. If you have a hole in your ship, it's gonna start sinking at some point. And so they need to fix it. They need to fix it. And that starts with hiring the right guy at offensive coordinator. So, we will see. We will certainly see. Is Dable still on the board? Brian Dable. I talked about this a little bit ago, but he's not a guy that I would be completely against, signing for the offensive coordinator position. But he's also a guy where I'm kind of in the middle about too. Do I actually want him? I'm not sure. Does he have the play calling experience? That's probably the things that he did with Josh Allen. Those are probably the couple things that make me not be. I wouldn't be entirely upset if it was Brian Dable. I wouldn't be entirely upset. And that's why the Eagles are taking their time. They want to see what Brian Dable does. We don't know how that meeting went. It could have gone very well. It could have ended in well, hey, I got this, I'm gonna go interview for this Bills head coaching job. I'm gonna go do this, I'm gonna go do that. So let's see how things play out. I think he also interviewed for the Buccaneers offensive coaching or the offensive coordinator position as well. And honestly, I think those two are probably higher on his list than the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator position. But you never know. We'll see. But I know that we're all chomping at the bit to fucking figure out who it's gonna be. That's for darn sure. I know I am. I just want to, I just want to see this team succeed. Like the rest of us at the end of the day, I just want to see this team succeed. Do what they can to get better. And compete at the highest level, because we know what they can do when they do. We know what the Eagles can do when they are playing to their full potential. And even though we won the Super Bowl last year, I'll still go with the fact that we weren't playing to our full potential because the offense, the passing game fucking sucked. The passing game was good enough. The passing game was good enough in 2024 to help complement the run game. That's the truth. That's the truth. But it could be so much more. And I think that's why the fans are frustrated. That's why I get frustrated when watching. I get frustrated when people want to blame Jalen Hurts. I get frustrated when people want to blame AJ Brown or any of that shit. Because I at the end of the day, I and I'll say this over and over again, and I'll die on it. I don't think it's Jalen Hurts. I think he's got, like I've said, I think he's definitely progressed. He's refined his game within the confinements of Nick Sirianni's scheme. And I don't think that there's, I think that leaves very little room for progression for Jalen. I think it leaves very little room for progression for Jalen. In college, he was taking tons of deep shots, tons of deep shots. We saw him do it earlier in his career as well, with Shane Steichen, and then and I just don't think that like there's a lot of decently calculated deep shots that are called up in this offense. Week one, I think it was week one against the Dallas Cowboys. Jahan Dotson ran an inside post all across the field. Had the safety one-on-one. It was like a 50-yard play. And I was like, oh man, yeah, let's have some more. Let's have some more of that. Like, that's fucking awesome. That was probably the only time that I saw any play like that, any concept like that, throughout the rest of the season. Maybe there was a couple. I think AJ, the touchdown for AJ against the Raiders, and then also I think AJ may have had one across the middle against the Vikings as well. But the deep shots you schedule, the deep shots you call up for your speed guys. Jahan Dotson is definitely faster than AJ Brown. You got to stretch the field, and I think that that's the other piece of it too, is that this Nick Sirianni fucking scheme doesn't stretch the field. And I know that we fired Kevin Patullo. I know that we all hated on Kevin Patullo, but Kevin Patullo was a Nick Sirianni guy. And I'll go back to the fact that because Nick Sirianni was given the ability to bring in Kevin Patullo as his offensive coordinator, Kevin Patullo probably submitted to Nick Sirianni. And so technically it was just a mind meld. There was not going to be any crazy new ideas. It was just going to be sprinkles of frou-frou shit, basically. And that's, and whenever they did introduce a new idea, to the offensive playbook, regardless of whatever week it was frou-frou shit. It was like, oh, we'll sprinkle that in. We're not gonna do anything more off of it. We're not gonna find different times throughout. If we sprinkle in something that looks good and works in the red zone, we're only gonna have it work in the red zone. We're only gonna call it in the red zone. We're not gonna do anything else. We're not gonna we're not gonna call end arounds for Devontae Smith. We'll just make it look like Devontae Smith is running an end around. We're not gonna actually call an end around to Devontae. We're not going to have Tank Bigsby and Saquon Barkley on the field at the same time, because that would be too much. That's too much for us. That we can't do that. It blows my mind how fucking inept. That's the part. I'll reach that point. I'll call this coaching staff inept. I think they're all fucking inept. And I think that the fact that the only thing that makes it worth making an argument for when it comes to Nick Sirianni is the fact that he has the record. You can't deny the record. But again, is that Jalen Hurts or is it Nick Sirianni? You go back and you look at all the coaches that Jalen Hurts has worked with, throughout his career. College, Jalen Hurts does nothing but win. So is it actually does Nick Sirianni actually have a hand in the winning, or is it Jalen? I'll tell you what. I'm not a big advocate for Doug Peterson. I think his scheme was kind of bland as well, and I would get frustrated with it as well. But could we have won another Super Bowl? Would we have won another Super Bowl with Doug Peterson as the head coach and Jalen Hurts as the quarterback? That's the question that I'll propose. Would we have won another Super Bowl if we still had Doug Peterson and Jalen Hurts as the quarterback? I think Jalen's the reason why we win. And obviously it's easy for Philly media because Philly media and Philly fans, even though I'm one of them, like we can be really fucking quick to jump on the quarterback, in this fan base. He is the leader, he is the guy, he is the face of the franchise. He's the guy that touches the ball the most. And when there's and when he has like a slightly below average game, like it's like, oh, fuck Jalen, like he fucking sucks. Like, it's like, chill the fuck out, man. Chill out. Like everybody wants to praise Josh Allen and like how well, how good of a quarterback he is, but the dude hasn't fucking made a Super Bowl. Jalen's been to 2. I'm not comparing Josh Allen's skill set to Jalen Hurts' skill set, but like, it is fairly similar. It is fairly similar. Like they both, pass well. I mean, Josh has a better arm. He has a better understanding of the passing game. Sure. I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to take that away from him. But like we've seen Josh Allen have bad games, and it's like, oh no, it's okay. It's just Josh. Like it's just a bad week. But like if Jalen Hurts has a bad game, which by the way, he doesn't have many bad games. There are games where he will have where it's just like mediocre. But then he'll have great games and he'll have elite games. He'll have games. He'll have games and streaks of games that can lead us to 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. Like, what are we like? I think it's a scheme. I think it's a scheme, man, and I think it's inept. I will say that. I think that like Howie Roseman knows. I think Howie Roseman knows. That's what I think, and I think that that's why they continue to pull back the power a little bit with Nick Sirianni year in and year out. Is like. You kind of like don't let like he's a fight like Nick Sirianni's a fiery dude. He's a passionate dude, and all he wants to win is like all he wants to do is win as well. But like, if he has something to say about the offense, like yeah, he's probably going to be a little bit pushy about it. Like I could see that. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. But like honestly, no, you gotta let him like. Somebody's gotta like hire. Like I'm pretty sure Big Dom was hired for the entire team, but no, somebody needs to watch Nick Sirianni in like the hallways. To be honest with you, just keep that guy out of the offensive. Just keep him out of the room. Just keep him out of it. And I'm not shitting on Nick Sirianni. Like, I am, but I'm not saying that I want to fire Nick Sirianni. It's not what I'm saying. I just don't want him involved in the offense moving forward. I don't want him involved in the offense moving forward. I think that the ineptness and the inconsistency of this offense has been due to Nick Sirianni. And not the players. Not the players. I think the players go week in and week out, trying to give it their best to perform at the best of their ability, and to win each and every single game. And they've been great at doing that. And granted, that's because Jalen Hurts brings a fucking like resume of pretty much nothing but winning. But when you have a guy that like, but when the offense starts to look congested, like that, like that's scheme, that's coaching. The congestion of an offense, that's something that coaching controls. That's something due to the fact like, oh, why are we calling this play here? Why are we calling the same play twice, which we've seen plenty of. You know, why are you running it on fucking 3rd and 19? I get you don't want to take the risk, but it's like we've seen Jalen Hurts complete 3rd and 19s, before. We've seen him convert them. We've seen him convert 4th and 13s, 4th and 18. We've seen him do this shit. I think and again, I'll go back. I said it earlier in the stream. Jalen Hurts did throw the ball all across the field at Oklahoma, and he took plenty of deep shots. I think Nick Sirianni is the wuss when it comes to opening up this scheme. I think that he's the reason why we don't take deep shots, and that would make perfect sense. It make perfect sense because he's a former wide receiver. He's a former wide receivers coach. He understands that if you run an inside post, there's most likely going to be a safety who can undercut it. If you don't run an inside post as much, okay, the risk for throwing an interception goes down. That's understood. Of course, anybody who plays Madden can understand that. My 5-year-old nephew can probably understand that. But my 5-year-old nephew probably could have called a better offensive game plan throughout the entire 2025 season for the Philadelphia Eagles this past year. So, it's like, and my other issue with this offense last year is drives me absolutely insane. And that happened. Sorry, it looks like I had a bit of an issue just then. And that happened all throughout the season. All throughout the season. There would be things that worked. In there were things in week 1 that worked that I didn't see at all throughout the rest of the season. And now, granted, again, you're going up against different defenses and things like that, and guys are defenses are going to give you different looks. I completely understand that, but what was the one main narrative for defensive play callers going up against our offense last year? Anybody? Can anybody tell me? Which is that it was either they could beat us with cloud coverage, or they could beat us with zone disguised as man. Now, that was pretty much the narrative. We knew that. Fans fucking knew that. Not fans fucking, but fans fucking, but fans knew that from very early in the season. From maybe week 2, week 3, we knew it right away. But yet but yet Kevin Patullo, and actually I'm gonna say Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni. From here on out, anytime I say Kevin Patullo, I'm gonna include Nick Sirianni onto that statement. Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni would call plays that called for wide receivers to run their routes right into the zone, making it harder for Jalen to tighter for Jalen to make his throws. Now Jalen has shown the ability to throw tight throw. And again, like I said in the beginning of the stream, I went back and I watched his Alabama tape and I watched his Oklahoma tape. I think he was better at Oklahoma. But he has shown throughout his football, throughout his life being a quarterback, that he has been able to show that he's been able to throw in tight windows when he needs to. I think that there's a piece of his game that people are just underappreciated, and it's because they're not doing their homework on how good Jalen is. And I get it. He has mediocre games, but the fact is, I believe that it's the limitations of the scheme. That's what I believe. Limitations of the scheme and the confinements of, I mean, it's a fucking, like, Nick Sirianni's calling a high school offense. He's calling a high school offense. You have elite players. You have elite players that are the best at what they do in the world. A.J. Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Saquon Barkley is one of the best running backs in the NFL. Devontae Smith is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and could be a number one for a lot of teams. Dallas Goedert is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And you guys got these guys like running fucking high school, fucking like a fucking high school system. I can't, like, I'm losing my fucking words because of like how inept this fucking coaching staff is. I really do. I think it's the coaching staff. And honestly, like I had this thought as soon as John Harbaugh got fired, which, by the way, I think was really stupid. I don't know why they went into it in a different route, but maybe it was just one of those things that was like Andy and the Eagles parting. Is that like, this is best for both sides? That the Eagles should have really considered going after John Harbaugh, making him the head coach. It would have been a shocker. But like, John Harbaugh is a great coach. He's a great coach, and I think it would have been better. It would have been better. The thing is would John Harbaugh have liked Jalen Hurts? And I there have been people who have said that he wouldn't, even if that ever came to fruition, which it obviously isn't going to now, but even if they ever had the thought of doing that, like, there are people that say that he wouldn't like Jalen Hurts, and I'm like, sure he would. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. He's a talented quarterback. Does he have inefficiencies in his game? Yeah, every quarterback has inefficiencies in their game. Tom Brady had inefficiencies in his game. He had to make his inefficiencies up with the mental awareness. And so he became a student of the game, one of the best students of the game. Peyton Manning was the same way. Matthew Stafford, as we see him get older, like he's becoming that way as well. Like, and obviously I'm talking about athleticism for all three of those quarterbacks that I just mentioned. But they all needed to make up their inefficiencies with mental, preparation, and become students of the game, of the passing game, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't make Jalen a bad. So it doesn't make Jalen a bad quarterback just because he has inefficiencies to his game. Yeah, I mean, all I want, I want this offensive coordinator search to be over. I want it to be over. I want to be able to talk about the potential of what we could do with whoever it's going to be. The Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys, who hired Christian Parker away to be their defense coordinator. Obviously, Christian Parker, and that obviously happened yesterday. Christian Parker was the Eagles secondary coach, largely responsible for developing Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, got them to first team All Pros. But I mean, Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell are also very talented players coming out of college. So, but the Dallas Cowboys are also interviewing Eagles assistant linebacker coach Ronell Williams. So there's that little nugget. So it looks like Christian Parker is trying to take some guys with him to Dallas. Oh boy. I really do think that as a whole, actually, this isn't something that like I'm worried about, but actually is something that I'm excited about because I do think the NFC East is going to be better, significantly better next year. You got John Harbaugh now coaching the New York Giants. He's going to have Jackson Dart to work with, and he's going to have Bo Scatterborough Cam Scatterborough, not Bo Scatterborough, Cam Scatterborough to work with at running back. When he gets back and healthy. And then there's also Malik Neighbors and so on and so forth. Are they going to be, is it going to be the NFC Beasts again? Like, I don't know. I remember earlier, in 2000, 2004, 2005, 2006, like the NFC East was labeled NFC Beast because the Giants were good, the Eagles were good, and the Cowboys were good with Tony Romo. The Commanders were always kind of, the last kid picked at dodgeball. That's what the Commanders were. The Commanders pretty much are still like that. I honestly, like, the only bright side for the Commanders, that I see next season is that Jaden Daniels could be coming back. So I honestly feel bad for them. They had that one great season, Jaden Daniels rookie season, with Cliff Kingsbury as the office coordinator, and then in the off season they hired all these old guys to try and compete and get back, and like it was probably the worst decision that they could possibly do. But now they're in a situation where they don't have Cliff Kingsbury. Jaden Daniels needs to get healthy. They have all these old guys that they're probably not going to keep. So it's like most likely the Commanders are going to be at the bottom of the barrel again. But the Cowboys could be better. The Giants, I think, are going to be better. And I think that I honestly don't know if I hate saying this as a fan. I really do. I hate saying this as a fan, but like, I don't know if the Eagles are going to be better. Do I think that they'll make the playoffs? Yeah. But, it depends on a lot. Depends on what we have. Is AJ coming back? I think he will, because I think it would be stupid to trade him. I think that they would rather, fix that situation and do everything they possibly can to keep AJ than get rid of him. And I think his talent and just who he is as a guy, and just his voice and presence in the locker room for all the players outweighs, the ineptness of the offensive coaching staff. So I don't think that they're going to try. I don't think they're going to try to trade AJ. But there are holes. There is going to be holes. Goddard's going to leave, most likely. Yeah. So yeah, it looks like Christian Parker is taking some of the Eagles or the defensive coaching staff with him to Dallas. But we will see what happens. I'm really starting to like be on the verge of thinking that they're, regardless of how much they want this to be a successful offseason, it might be, I think the draft will go well. I think, obviously I think things like that are going to be good, but like the rest of it, like the offensive coordinator, like I'm starting to think it's going to be somebody that we absolutely would not like. I'm starting to think that it's going to be like Mike Kafka. Yeah, I'm starting to think that it's going to be somebody like Mike Kafka, and that I would absolutely like. You can't sell that to the fan base. Like, we would be calling for Howie Roseman's head if you know if it were Mike Kafka or Jeffrey Lurie. Like obviously, like we would be upset with them. Obviously Howie Roseman's a great GM and Jeffrey Lurie is a great owner. But if it's a guy like Mike Kafka, like it's boring. He didn't do much with the Giants at the Giants offensive coordinator position. He is a former Eagles quarterback, so like I guess there's familiarity there, but familiarity doesn't always equal success. Just ask Nick Sirianni. Oy vey. The one thing about that's the thing about what made the offense so good in 2022 is that Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni were on that same coaching staff in Indianapolis. But Shane Steichen was the brains. Shane Steichen was the creative guy. Nick was just yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame. I think Shane Steichen would have been a decent head coach here. He would have been a decent head coach here in Philadelphia. But it was 2 years into Nick Sirianni's head coaching career in Philadelphia, and you can't really get rid of a guy that quickly. Like you got to let him develop and so on and so forth. But the other key ingredient, geez, like talking about this team just makes me run out of breath now. They spin us into so many fucking circles, and it's absolutely a mystery. Like the team is the team's a mystery, year in and year out. It's like you can't, like, that's the difference between the Eagles and the Chiefs. It's like year in and year out, like you can't say that they're gonna be good. Like there's always some sort of like hint of something can go really wrong. Something could go really wrong that could cause the team to fall off a cliff. And that's one of the things that I think about often. But share your thoughts, share your comments, share your concerns, like and subscribe if you haven't already yet. Would love to hear from you. I think the main thing is you there's a few ingredients that you got to bring in. You got to bring in a guy who's gonna bring creativity to the offense, gonna get the players excited, it's gonna bring consistency. And also, you can't get too greedy, I guess, but you want to hope to find a guy that possesses all of those things. And that is also going to be, it's going to stick around. It's going to stick around for a few years. So. But I'm going to be I'm sticking around for a little bit right now. So, I know that we're a little bit more than an hour and a half in, but I'm still going to stick around for a little bit. So let's see what else. Let's see if there's anything further that we could talk about. I'm looking for any updates. It looks like McDaniel won't meet with the Bills. I thought he signed with the Chargers already. But while we're looking for any updates that we possibly can, let's talk about the games to come: the AFC Championship game and the NFC Championship game tomorrow at 1 p.m. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. we have the New England Patriots taking on the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos, obviously led by their head coach Sean Payton, who everybody knows very well from his time with the Saints. And then over the last couple of years, like his development, his ability to develop Bo Nix and turn Bo Nix into one of the, better young passers in the game today. He's you got two second year pros, 2 second-year quarterbacks who have developed really nicely. You got Bo Nix, and then you have Drake May. Unfortunately, Bo Nix got injured last week in the divisional playoff game, so it will not be Bo Nix who will be playing or who will be starting for the Denver Broncos. It will be their backup, Jarrett Stidham, who Sean Payton did give a lot of high praise for. But who knows? That's that you got to do that. Obviously, it's a big moment for Jarrett Stidham. Can he win? I don't know. There's not much that we've seen of Jarrett Stidham. I can tell you as a Philadelphia Eagles fan that I'm very familiar with backup quarterbacks, going on to win the Super Bowl for us. But honestly, both these teams had a 14-3 record, and both these teams have been great all season long. I'm more impressed with the development of Drake May, and more impressed with what Mike Vrabel has done with this Patriots team this year. And so I think that the Patriots are gonna win, and I think that they're gonna win handily. Honestly, I think it's gonna be like a 30-15 type game. Call me crazy, but I think it's gonna be like a 30-15 type of game. And then we have the LA Rams taking on the Seattle Seahawks. This is going to be an interesting game. The Rams, obviously, as we know, have a very potent offense. They've been a little bit inconsistent, throughout the end of the season. They almost lost to the Bears, but the one thing about the Seahawks that you can say, they've been consistent all season long. They've been putting up a decent amount of points, and the defense for the Seahawks has been absolutely suffocating. And then that game's also going to be in Seattle, so we know that the fan base is nicknamed the 12th man for a reason. It's going to be rocking, and it's going to be loud, and it's going to be hard for that Rams offense. But we talked about Matthew Stafford earlier in this stream, and I will say that if there's anybody who can cut out the noise in that stadium in Seattle, it's going to be Matthew Stafford, bringing all the experience that he has. But the Rams offense is going to need to be on point. They're going to need to bring their A game. It's another NFC Championship game for them, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'll say this. It's going to be really hard to pick against Seattle. But I'm going to pick against Seattle right now. I think Drake May has done a phenomenal job in his second year as a pro, but I think that this is going to be this. I don't think he's gonna quite ready for. I don't think he's ready for the Super Bowl yet. I don't think he's going to defeat. Maybe they will. Maybe I'm kind of torn. Part of me wants to see Matthew Stafford get his second ring. Because I do think the Rams can beat either the Patriots or the Broncos. I do think that. I do think that this is going to be. I do think that I can tell you this: whoever does get to the Super Bowl, yeah, I haven't made up my mind quite yet on the Rams or the Seahawks. But I will say that both the Rams and the Seahawks are better than New England or Denver, and I think that it's going to be an NFC. I think it's going to be an NFC Super Bowl win this year. So that I will say about that. But we're about to wrap it up here. Again, I appreciate all of you that joined. Thank you so much for contributing. Thank you for all of your support. Again, if there is any emergency update with the Philadelphia Eagles offense coordinator search, I will hop on whenever that does happen so that we can talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. Hopping on. You guys have a beautiful rest of your day. This is DB Talking Now, DB Talking Birds, DB Talking Philadelphia Eagles. Thank you so much. Peace out. Go Birds.